For a moment, welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to dive into the S3 Cloud Breach Lab on PwnedLabs, or Breach in the Cloud is what it's called on PwnedLabs. This is more of a purple team exercise. Here's what we're going to do. In the first part of the lab, we are going to trace down a malicious actor. We're going to identify which account was compromised, how they elevated their access, what file they downloaded. Once we identify the path that the malicious actor used, we're going to repeat that same path. We want to replicate the steps of the attacker to see how it was possible for them to do this. So after we do the blue team side of it, we're going to do the red team side of it and do the same attack. So I think if I understand my colors properly, blue plus red equals purple. So in this video, we're going to do a little bit of purple teaming. Now, full disclosure, I did do this lab ahead of time. I did this lab a few days ago. Generally, when I do labs, I do them blind. So I just want you to know I did this lab a few days ago, but it was really fun to do then. And because it was a few days ago, I guarantee you I forgot some aspects of how to do it. So I'm still going to struggle my way through this, but I will approach it as someone who hasn't done it. So I'll share with you some of the things that tripped me up, some of the things I found confusing, and some of the things I already knew. So without any further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen, and also let me invite you. This lab is completely free. You do not need a PwnedLabs subscription to do it, so you can actually follow along with me. So if you're watching this live, go to pwnedlabs.io, log into your account or create an account, and search for the Breach in the Cloud Lab. If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and pause the video. Well, first, search for it, pause the video, launch the lab, and then unpause, and we can work on this lab together. So here we go. We are provided with some entry point details. Let's go ahead and get our notes ready first. Cherry tree. Notes. Here we go. And we call this one Breach in the Cloud. And we'll copy down some of the information we have, right? So we have our credentials. I'll show you how these work in a little bit if you're totally new to AWS. So here is our scenario. We've been alerted to a potential security incident. The huge logistics security team have provided you with AWS keys of an account that saw unusual activity. So we know that the account we have credits for is the one that saw unusual activity. That will be important because we can kind of deal with who am I and see the account name, as well as AWS CloudTrail Logs around the time of the activity. We need your expertise to confirm the breach by analyzing our CloudTrail Logs, identifying the compromised AWS service, and any data that was exfiltrated. So let's go ahead and copy that. Scenario, if I could type. All right, so we have, this is the compromised, we'll say unusual, well, I won't even do anything here. Here is the account with the unusual activity. So the first thing we want to do is let's connect to this account and just see, like, who am I? What's the name of the account? Looking over at chat. Do you need an AWS account? Not for this lab. You do not need an AWS account. All right, let's go ahead and dive into this. I'll pull up my terminal. And do I have AWS installed? I do. If you don't have the AWS CLI installed, if you just Google AWS CLI install on AWS's website, you can literally copy and paste the command and it will get installed. Super easy. But let's do AWS configure. It's going to ask for our access key. Our secret. Yeah, US East 1 will be fine. And now if we do AWS STS get caller identity. This is kind of like AWS's who am I. If you want to do who am I in AWS through the CLI, that's the command. So that's all I'm doing there. Let me go ahead and get my screenshot tool open, which is Lightshot. It's what I use to take screenshots. I get that question a lot. So here's Lightshot. And we know that this is the compromised user right there. So I want to take note of that. Right, temp user is the name of our compromised user. And then our CloudTrail logs you get from Discord, right? So to get started, download the CloudTrail logs there from the case files channel on our PwnedLabs Discord. I did that during the 5-minute countdown. So I downloaded those things to this VM. And so let's go ahead and make a directory. Let's see. All right, a bunch of CloudTrail logs. Now, if you're new to AWS, the best thing to do when you discover stuff is ask ChatGPT. So we have this AWS CloudTrail logs. If we don't know what that is, we can say, so AWS CloudTrail logs are records of events that occur within an AWS environment. CloudTrail is a service offered by AWS that provides governance, compliance, blah, blah, blah. Here are some key aspects. Event logging captures detailed information about each API call made to the AWS service. This includes the identity, so we should be able to search for temp user, the time, the source IP address, that might also be key, the request parameters, and the response elements returned by the AWS service. We have two types of events, management and data events. Continuous monitoring, compliance, and audit. So it's just the logging tool in AWS. So here we have it in raw form. Control L. Dude! Marco Mahoney, you just changed my life, bro. See, that's how much of a noob I am. I didn't know you could Control L to clear. I just have gotten really good at typing clear. You're the real MVP. Let's see, let's just do one of these. So you can see, not very easy to read. But if we do that to JQ, let's install JQ. JQ will format the logs to make it look nicer for us. We'll have ChatGPT explain it better than me. It's a lightweight and flexible command line JSON processor. It's designed for processing JSON data, blah, blah, blah. So it just makes it look a lot neater. I'll show it to you. But we need to install it. All right. So you see what that did? It formatted it for us. So we can look at it a lot easier. But we have all these labs. I wonder if I do something like cat that. I don't know if this will work. Hey, it did. So I think with that command, I took all of these logs and put them in one large log file. Yeah, see the size of it? So now we don't have to go through all these logs. We can look at our one full log file. And if we go back to our notes, it says, we have been provided with AWS keys of an account that saw unusual activity. So I know it's temp user, right? So I think with that, we could cat, well, let's install Visual Studio Code. That might be the best way to kind of grep through here. I don't know the command. Is it? All right. Let's install Visual Studio. I think it'll be a lot easier to see stuff. See what I'm missing in chat. Terraflot says, I'm wanting to share my bash alias commands with you, but unsure if you want my helpful Linux commands. Yeah, love to see it. All right, we got that installed. dpk or sudo dpkgi install home Tyler downloads. Oh, why am I doing install, silly Tyler? That's what the I is for. Don't think this will take too long. If it does, we'll just use like Nano, but I just think Visual Studio Code is going to look a lot nicer when we're kind of looking through the code. I could also just, let's try, we'll eventually open it there, but for now, let's cat full logs grep. Is it temp user? Is that the name of our compromised account? And then I think, is it grep, I'm going off memory, -A will give us additional context. So like it'll show us the 20 records around temp user. I might be doing this wrong. Let's find out. No, I did it right. Sweet. Good job, Tyler. So let's see if we can kind of set up the attack path, figure out what happened. So here's our user, our temp user. All right, so they're authenticating. So the first thing they try to do is they list objects. Access denied. Oh, and there. So okay, so let's look at this. I'll take a screenshot and walk you through this. So our finding, temp user attempted to list files from the emergency bucket. Okay, so those of you who might be new to AWS, what this person did is they did S3 ls S3. We'll do it later. I'll show you the command. But an S3 bucket is sort of like an FTP server. If you think about it that way, it stores files. Unstructured data is the correct terminology, but it stores files. And if you just search for S3 bucket breaches, there's been massive breaches of S3 buckets. Well, what this user did is they got access to this temp user account. We don't know how, maybe it's a phishing attack, maybe it's something else, but they have access to temp user, and they're attempting to list the data that's in the emergency data recovery bucket, but you can see they got access denied. So the temp user does not have access to that bucket. What else do they do? So again, list objects, they got access denied. List account aliases, not allowed to do that. List instance profile. So these are all like common AWS enumeration. That when you get access to an AWS account, you kind of get a lay of the land. That's what we're doing here. So if you think about Windows, you do whoami/priv, things like that, net user. That's kind of the AWS equivalent. Amar said, does anyone know what Tyler's Twitch is? I know what Tyler's Twitch is. I'll drop the link. I just dropped a link in YouTube to my Twitch. Hacksmarter.live will take you to the Twitch. What are we doing here? Listing signing certificates. So you can see what this user is doing is a bunch of checks for privilege escalation, seeing, hey, what does our user have access to? And they might even been using a tool such as Paku. Let me show you Paku. Paku is a tool developed for AWS pen testing by the greatest pen testing firm on the planet called Rhino Security Labs. We'll do sudo. They might be using Paku, I don't know. The screenshotting tool I use, Butler, is Lightshot. So let's download Paku. Paku is kind of like Metasploit for the cloud. Once again, developed by Rhino Security Labs. What will we name our new session? We'll call it Breach in the Cloud. All right, now we need to set our keys. We can import keys default, since we just set them as the default keys. And now if I do search privesc, we have IAM privesc scan. We can run IAM privesc scan. And so what this is going to do in order to try to check for privilege escalation paths is going to run a lot of the commands that you see running. So like this is going to try to get the enum permission. So it's going to run some of those commands we are seeing in the CloudTrail logs. They're going to fail because we don't have permission. So you can see here's what it's trying to do. Running module that, confirming permission. So it's trying to list groups. Failed, missing required. List attached user policies. Failed, missing required. And that's the exact same thing that we're seeing in the log. So they may be using legit Paku or something similar to do this. Butler said I use Flameshot. Is that similar? Yeah, I think it's very similar. We can do this. So now the same thing. This is going to try to list groups. We'll do yes. And you can see it's failing. It doesn't have permissions, but it's running those commands. So everything we're running here is going to be picked up in the CloudTrail logs. It's all going to fail because it says privilege escalation was successful, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't. We don't have permissions to look at anything. You can see this error occurred, but these are the exact things that we are seeing in the CloudTrail logs. That's why I think they may be actually doing this for the attack. We're getting a bunch of it. Authorized, not authorized. Let's just scroll down and see if we can find what they were authorized to do. Oh, you know the other thing we should look at? The IP. Remember, IPs are important. You can, of course, mask your IP, but let's look at where this attacker is coming from. Somewhere in Denmark. I call that Denmark. A VPN server. So in a real thing, we'd want to take note of this. So here's the IP. I don't know if this would matter, but we can do like IP reputation lookup and see if this is a known malicious IP as an indicator of compromise in IOC. I'm a human. I just had to tell it that. So it's in Turkey. I think Turkey may have some known, APT groups operating out of there. But the sender IT, everything seems normal. Besides just having an IP coming from Turkey, where I'm guessing none of the employees live in Turkey. This would be kind of the smoke, right? Indicating that this is a malicious actor doing these things. IP address coming from Turkey. Let's say this is an organization in the US. There shouldn't be anyone from Turkey trying to connect through these accounts. So that's one thing that we should take note of. Drink of water. Let's see if he ever gets to do anything, or she. You can see all these things they're trying to do, they're not getting authorized to do it. Oh, we have some changes. So they're able to describe endpoints, describe layers. Oh, okay, they can't do SageMaker, so they're still doing enumeration here. They're being very noisy. All right, let's scroll down. We go to the bottom. What are we doing at the bottom here? So now we're making this we have some privilege escalation going on right here. So what they're doing here is assuming a role, which is a form of privilege escalation. They're essentially elevating to another role. So if we think about Windows, this would be lateral or privilege movement, because they're going to a more privileged account. They're going from the temp user, and they figured out as the temp user. How did they figure this out? Somehow they figured out that they can assume a role, and the role that they can assume is an admin role right there. And then we're actually given the access key ID, the session token, the assumed role ID, my session, but they're now in the admin role. And I bet they use that, of course, to download that S3 bucket they're trying to get access to initially. Now we could. It's called my session, right? There's that get object. That's what I'm looking for. Let's add a little more context. Let's do like 40. Here they go. Yep. Exactly what they did. So we have now traced down this hacker. We should probably take notes for this. Let's go back to where they assumed the role. Right here. All right. Admin role. Right here. Whoops. Wrong tool. Snipping tool sucks. All right. Make this a little bit nicer so it's easy to see what's going on. So we traced it. We did the blue team side of it. We figured out if we trace this back, we have a user with an IP located in Turkey who compromised an account called temp user. From the temp user account, they used Paku or some other tool, and it seems that they scanned all the permissions they possibly could. Well, first, I guess the first thing they try to do is download data from the emergency data recovery S3 bucket, but they failed. Once they failed, they scanned for a bunch of different permissions, got access to not on almost all of them, but eventually they were able to assume a more privileged role, specifically a role called admin role. Once they assumed the more privileged role of admin role, they then successfully downloaded from the emergency bucket and fully breached our whatever is an emergency.txt. So now our job is, can we replicate the same attack? Let's ask ChatGPT. Common AWS CLI enumeration a pen tester will do on an AWS pen test. So these are a lot of things they tried, but it failed for them. But let's try these ourselves, okay? It doesn't seem like our user has much permissions, but we'll try these. I never had to use Visual Studio Code either. I totally did that with cat and grep. That's how freaking lead I am. Okay, so we can't do that. Whoops. Okay, that doesn't work. Do I have... Oh, I need to do a role name. So see, I don't know how the attacker knew what command to run. Here's how to assume the role, but we could assume it. I mean, we could assume the role. But I want to know, how did the attacker know that they could assume that role? Or did they just, like, guess it? See, our user's not authorized to do much of anything. So I might want to look at. I wonder what they're looking at right before they assume the role. A beautiful keyboard sound. Thank you. This is my ASMR for you all. On my, you guys want to see my sweet mechanical keyboard? I'll show it to you. You guys ready for it? You're not ready for this. It's a $15 keyboard from Walmart. I'm glad it sounds cool though. So, this is just STS. This is the one I already ran. Oh, because they assumed the role, then they ran Who Am I? Let's open. Now let's open Visual Studio Code. And let's just track this down a little bit better. So here's where they assume the role. This has nothing to do with that. Here's our IP. Describe event aggregates. I might have to look at the walkthrough for that one. I mean, we have credentials here, but we'll have to assume this ourselves. Yeah, you couldn't use PS aux, not in something like this. Oh, my fast typing sounds cool. Yeah, I type, what, last time we did our typing race game, I think I got to like 120 words per minute. Alright, let's see if we can do the exact same attack. And we can. So we just assumed that same admin role just now. And now we need to save this information. There's a few different ways we can do it. I don't think I have anything special in my AWS thing. Let me double check though that I don't expose some weird AWS creds. No, I don't. Okay. So AWS saves stuff right here. In your AWS credentials, you can see my secret key, my access key. This is just the stuff for this lab. And so we're going to set a new profile with this information right here. So we'll copy this. And we'll just open Notepad. Right. So now we'll do nano, home, Tyler, AWS credentials. Set a new role called admin role. Copy that. And now is it AWS session token? I'm blanking on what that's called. AWS session token, that's what I'm looking for. So this is exactly what the threat actor did. And then they did like AWS STS get caller identity profile admin role. And we assume the admin role. Now we can do AWS, I think it's S3 buckets, list S3, and then it's going to be the name of that S3 bucket. This one right here. With our admin role profile. And there, you can see we can actually list these. Now, if we try to do that without our admin role, so if we try to use our temp user role, it fails, right? So the admin role is what's giving us permission to see those files. And now we can download this. So the threat actor downloaded emergency.txt. And so the way we can do that is we'll just add emergency.txt. We want to save it to our present directory. And instead of the ls command, we'll change it to cp for copy. ls cat emergency. And here is our emergency and our flag. This document provides a reference to essential credentials and steps to be taken during the disaster recovery scenario. And we have some admin credentials here. Lots of admin credentials. Yeah, you don't want an access key. You don't want a threat actor to get access to this, but we have our flag right here. Go back to breach in the cloud, enter our flag. And we have completed it. What was the message? Wasn't there another one? Let's check out what message.txt is quick. Congratulations on completing the lab and welcome to PwnedLabs. Our goal is to offer a dynamic community where you can progress regardless of where you currently stand in your cybersecurity journey. We're thrilled to have you here with us. All right. Let's look at the walkthrough though, because I still have one main question. How did the attacker know that they could assume the admin role? Because all my commands fail for enumeration. So you can see JQ stuff. I did a little bit different, I think, but still similar. Here's all those error messages I saw as well. Look at that. Shout out to Paku. Rhino. Greatest pen testing firm around. Yep, so we found that ourselves. We're able to assume admin role. Well, how do they know to assume it though? All right, retracing steps. This is what we needed to do. Apparently, our account had permissions to list user policy. So this is what the threat actor eventually got to work. Which I suppose if I spent enough time doing it, I would have figured it out. Right? So in our username temp user, we have a policy, almost like permission, right? A policy or permissions assigned to our temp user called test temp user. And then we can see what do these permissions allow us to do, which is what this command is doing. So get user policy username temp user. So similar to this, instead of listing, we're getting it, and then we have to specify the policy name. Well, we saw that our user temp user has a policy name test temp user. And if we do this, we can read this. Here's our user. Here's our policy. What does it allow us to do? Well, we have an allow. It allows us to assume role. What role does it allow us to assume? It allows us to assume the admin role. So that is how the threat actor eventually did it. They ran get user policy and got that. But that was the only command that they could run. Now, when you do an AWS pen test, this is how it generally works. A customer will provide you with 2 accounts as the pen tester. One account is a global read-only role, which means I have read rights to everything, but I can't do anything. But what I can do with that read-only role is I can look for things like this. You notice that our account didn't have permission to do this. In a pen test, because you would have a global reader role, you would be able to see this right away, and you would tell the client, hey, this temp user is overly privileged because they can assume the role of an admin role and then get access to your emergency data. So in a AWS pen test, we would have spotted this before the threat actor did, and that's one of the things that we check. We also ask for like, hey, give us the typical account you give a developer. Can we priv ask from a developer role? Because as you see in the news, what often happens is a threat actor gets access to a developer's account and then they take everything over from there. So when you do an AWS pen test for a client, those are the 2 accounts you generally ask for unless a client has specific needs. But a read-only account, almost for auditing purposes, and a dev account to see what could a threat actor do in an assumed breach environment. So you would have spotted this during an actual AWS pen test because you would have permission to run all these other tools to figure out, hey, what might have some overly privileged roles. But eventually the threat actor did that. They assumed the role, and then with that role, they added creds just like I did, and then they downloaded the emergency bucket and they finished the activity. Really cool stuff. Let me look over at chat. How do you have Paku installed? Super easy to install Paku. Ready? Sudo pip3 install Paku. That's all you have to do, and it will install Paku for you. So this means you missed user policy enumeration. Yeah, I didn't spend much time enumerating. If you saw me, I literally just ran like 4 commands. If we spent more time enumerating, we'd have eventually stumbled across that. As you see, our threat actor did after failing a bunch of times. But that is it for the Cloud Breach Room. I will say once again, if you're just tuning in, just joining me live, or watching it on YouTube, remember, this is a free room. Oh, this would be a fun lab to do. Hunt in the cloud with Splunk. Maybe we'll do that one. But this is completely free. Anyone and everyone can do this room on PwnedLabs.io. You do not need a subscription. Free to do. Follow along. Whoops. And get started with some of your own AWS pen testing. But I hope you all enjoyed this room. Hope you enjoyed this lab. I want to say thank you again for taking the time to hang out with me for another video. And I will see y'all in the next one.